3, 2, 1. Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer, and this is Internal Alchemy, and I have a new guest with us today. And in fact, I couldn't decide what I wanted to talk. There's so many things to talk about with him. I couldn't decide if I wanted to do Internal Alchemy or Strange Mosaic, so we're going to do both. The public hour will be Internal Alchemy, and the patrons hour will be Strange Mosaic. And my guest is a podcaster, martial artist, coach, entrepreneur, and public speaker with a lifetime of study and interest in esoteric information, philosophy, comparative religion, mythology, mysteries, the paranormal, and current geopolitical events. The basis of his work is founded in a sincere pursuit of truth wherever it may lead, and is dedicated to assisting in educating and empowering those who take the path of self-discovery in dealing with the problems and challenges we face in the world today. David Whitehead, welcome to Internal Alchemy.
Hey, Emily, how you doing? Thank you so much for the invitation. Looking forward. This is going to be great.
Absolutely. You know, I've kind of followed you on and off for several years because you kind of have popped in and out more. Like sometimes you've been doing more media, sometimes less over the years. And I assumed it was just because of other things that you were pursuing in life. But you kind of first came onto my radar when you were doing a series of shows with Randy, kind of like from a men's perspective with him and Vinny Eastwood. Right. And I kind of thought at the time my life was a disaster, but I thought it was cool what you were doing because I could see the way you were balancing your informational pursuit of truth with your personal transformation through physical discipline in terms of like your martial arts and, you know, really working on balancing the inner transition that you were making in yourself with the one you wanted to see is sort of in the outer world. And I always appreciated that. And so I guess in my head, I always, you know how sometimes you have in your head, I'll talk to this person, and then it gets away from you for a really long time. And just in the past couple of weeks, you've kind of really come back onto my radar quite a bit. You've been doing a variety of different kinds of podcasts and talking to a lot of different kinds of people as of late, which appeals to me. And also your interview with Mickey Willis was just phenomenal. And I feel like that balance that you've managed to achieve allowed you to have that great interview with him. Like there's lots of people interviewing him right now and they're all good, but there was something special about yours. And it isn't necessarily because you're like the most some people are great interviewers and you're good, but it was really more about how much you guys were able to like have a sharing of sort of information and spirit based on your own personal transformations. And I really thought it was awesome. So I was like, I have to ask him now. So
Oh, well, thank you. And yeah, like I've never tried to come across as like this, you know, it's just part of my personality. I'm not super structured, and it's something I need to do more of. And as I've learned that lesson about how to structure my content, how to structure the way I do interviews and try to do it in a way that's different. I think people now, the feedback I've been getting, and I just know what I prefer. Yeah. And I can only structure my content based off my own perspective, right? So I prefer something that's more organic, conversational, you know, where you're connecting with the person, as opposed to always that hard-hitting journalistic and, you know, Tucker Carlson style, which is great too. But it's just, I think that when you create media, and especially today, you have to be true to yourself, and people want more of that. They're kind of sick of the airbrushed, perfectly polished, CNN, you know, kind of look. People want real. People are sick of lies. People want to know some real facts from real people. And I think that's what it gives the strength to what you could call the alternative research community, is that it's full of people that are genuinely seeking out the truth. Something woke them up somewhere down the line. I've had my moments. I'm sure you've had yours. I've had, you know, every possible dark night of the soul experience, you know, in terms of just trying to find out where I sit and go through this information. And then a new chapter comes up and you got to research it. So the reason my content is so eclectic is because my search for the truth was always like that. I always knew like I can't find it in one place. I can't just look in one book. I can't just follow one person. There are people and books and ideas that I obviously favor, as we all do. But in the end, it's important to be eclectic. And there's times where I bring people on my show where I might even disagree with 80 or 90% of where they're coming from, but that 10% is so good. It's so relevant to what I want to cover, you know? So that's all this is. For me, this is just my show. It kind of just started as YouTube vlogs, and then it turned into recording Skype conversations with various authors and thinkers that I admired or wanted to learn from. And then it morphed into some other stages, and then it's going to continue to morph. And it's been my own sort of pursuit. And I've just decided to document it and share it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. You know, I used to, when I first started doing this, I felt pressured to be a really polished interviewer, which I certainly was not in the beginning. And I have my moments now where I am, but largely I'm still not. But, you know, I felt pressure to like really deliver a polished interview or to really dig into somebody's like piece of work that they're really well known for. And then, you know, and even though as I got more comfortable, I felt okay sort of letting my personality just come into it.
Right.
I really kind of let all that other stuff go. After last year, I was at a conference that I was speaking at, and someone like basically told me that like part of what like the reason that what they're really interested in hearing me talk about is what I talk about with people when I'm not on the air, right? Like my crazy conversations about whatever weird experiences I've had or what they've had, like that's the stuff they want to hear, right? So now I just kind of let that, I mean, sometimes I end up delivering a good, you know, fact digging kind of interview or whatever, but largely people are mostly interested in like what we talk about when we don't know the cameras are watching kind of thing, right? So absolutely. And I do think that's one of the really cool things about the alternative media is because there's a lot of things not cool about the alternative media at this point, let's face it.
For sure.
But everybody has their own style, at least all the people who are having some success. It doesn't really work to try and imitate somebody else's style. Whereas in the mainstream media, they're all basically adhering to a fairly similar format. Even if they're delivering a different perspective, it's all kind of similar. So,
right.
Absolutely.
Well, and again, if the goal is to go on this journey of discovering knowledge, information, truth, getting a bit better understanding of the world, and hopefully, I like how you were saying that you have two shows where you talk a lot about the inner journey, and then the other show is about the out there, you know, all these different things that are happening externally. There seems to be camps of people that are in one or the other. They're in extremes. They're like, it's only about personal development, psychology. That's it. There's nothing else that matters. And then there's people that are like, no, that's all just a waste of time. It's all about focusing on what's the current events and the hard hitting journalism and the politics. And I don't think there needs to be a battle between those two things. You need to do both. You know, holistic thinking is the goal, and having the ability to be genuine, to be sincere. I believe that telling the truth isn't always that you have to put yourself in this pressure situation where you have all the final answers of reality of what's going on. I mean, the greatest minds that have ever existed have labored their entire lives and even gone insane trying to figure out what the truth of reality is. But what you can do with the truth is you can be honest. And if you can be honest and people see that, I think there's something valuable there. And I think that's the problem with the mainstream media, is that they're not willing to correct mistakes. They're not willing to go on a journey of trying to actually reveal knowledge to people. It's literally about creating and generating and manufacturing opinion. Yeah. And that's a problem. So I think that we have to approach this from two angles. Everything we're learning externally about what's going on in the world, or studying the nature of reality, or asking the big questions of the universe or whatever, that's always a reflection of what is going on inside of each and every one of us. So it is the micro macro effect. And so when you present it, if you have the ability to show both of those spectrums in your work, I think that's going to have a really positive benefit for the people that listen. And that's why I love shows like this. And that's what I aspire to. That's what my goal is, to try to give a full package about all this stuff.
Absolutely. So since we're in the Internal Alchemy Hour, let's go on the inner journey here. And for people who aren't familiar with you, and even for myself, because I've popped in and out over the years, so I don't know a whole lot about your personal story. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of how you became the truth warrior? I liked this quote you had on your website that says, "The basic difference between an ordinary man and a warrior is that a warrior takes everything as a challenge, while an ordinary man takes everything as a blessing or a curse." And that's Carlos Castaneda. And it's one of these things, like, you know, when you're on your truth journey kind of thing, like in the beginning, you're all fired up and you want to fight against everything, right? Yeah. And then you go through a phase where you're like, no, everything's perfect and everything's happening as it should be. And then you find a balance. And, you know, one of the things for me is like, I'm in that rebalancing phase of, like, you know, with the pendulum swings one side and then the other, and then it kind of comes to the middle. And I had been, you know, sometimes when people describe themselves as a warrior at this point, I reject it because it's kind of like when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And so if you're a warrior, it's like everything is a fight. But that description of a warrior really resonated for me. So I kind of am curious. I know you have a martial arts background, but can you tell us a little bit about maybe your early life and sort of how some of this stuff developed for you to becoming the truth warrior that you are?
Oh, well, thank you. First of all, what I do with the title, I don't usually use it for my own. It's not like I'm trying to brand like a superhero thing where I'm the truth warrior. I try to use it as a concept. And then what I did was I had to come up with a name for the show. As you said, I grew up in martial arts, and I'll get into that in a sec. But I thought a quick story about that name was that I was at a martial art conference when I was like 16, 17. And at these conferences, it's kind of like when you go to a speaking event where there's different speakers every so often, and you get a variety of information over the weekend. Well, in these martial art conferences, you train on a different training mat with a different master from a different style of martial arts. So you get a really nice array of training. And there was only one sensei there that was talking about philosophy, and he was an Aikido master. And I went to his session, and what he was saying really resonated with me during a time in my life where I was trying to figure out, you know, who I am, where my place is, what my purpose is. And I was asking the question in my mind, what's the point of all this martial arts stuff? What does it mean to be a warrior? What is all this about anyways? Because, you know, I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't like killing people and practicing killing people and all this kind of stuff. So I'm like, there has to be something more to it. And I remember when I was young, I got into martial arts around the age of 9, and I got into it by, I started watching like the Ninja Turtles and all that stuff. But the reason I got into it was I went to the library, found a book on it, started reading some of the philosophy and the ideas about it. And I had also seen some martial art demonstrations at my local community center that really inspired me. And what inspired me wasn't that these people were beating people up. What inspired me was the powerful nature of who they were, just how strong they were. You know, 5'2", you know, people that are just like throwing big 250-pound people around and an amazing technique. And just so, it was just amazing. And it was all built on self-defense. It wasn't something where you just saw someone run up and, you know, like an Antifa gang member just run up and start smacking somebody. It was like something that had an honor system to it and a mystique to it that really appealed to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I started training karate. I got into it. And then, but I was still, you know, looking into what's the whole philosophy behind it. And fast forwarding back to this Aikido master that I took his little seminar, I asked him at the end, there was a question and answer period. I went up to him and I asked him, and I said, you know, what is the whole point of the warrior philosophy? Like, why are we doing this? And then I kind of, as I started talking to him, I just kind of all came out of me, and I'm like, you know, what's the point of life? Why are we doing any of this? What does it matter? And he just looked at me and he said, listen, the martial arts is geared towards helping you discover the truth. The truth is what is going to guide you in your life, because the world is full of trappings and lies. And so to be able to not lie to yourself is a superpower. And in order to be able to find the truth, you have to develop the spine of a warrior. You have to develop that strength and fortitude and that ability to confront the lie, because the lie is the adversary in this sort of philosophical concept. And I thought, interesting. And he said, and that lie doesn't necessarily mean someone telling you a lie. That lie is the inner combat of you telling yourself a lie. And if you can win against yourself, then you can defeat your opponent. And so I thought, well, that's it. That's just, it linked it for me. So that's later on, fast forward, when I started doing radio on like American Freedom Radio and stuff like that, they're asking me, what's the name of your show? And I thought back to that experience, you know, I thought, well, the goal is to find out the truth about these very complicated matters. And in order to find the truth, we can't be soft glove approach all the time, you know, because there was a lot of airy fairy new age stuff going on in the circles at that time. And it just didn't, I grew up with the martial artists. I grew up with warriors, and I'm like, no, you need some spine. You need some courage. You need some, you know, some graft. And so I'm like, okay, truth warrior. Boom, that's it. So that's the kind of a story of the show, the title. And I always tell people on my show, I am not here to say I am the arbiter of truth. I'm merely somebody that is on the pursuit of truth, and I use the warrior ethos as the the skeletal structure, the background, the support system of that pursuit. And I find there's a lot of valuable things in it, even for people that don't want to train physically, or maybe they're disabled and they can't. Although I believe it's very important that people do some kind of movement training. I think that the philosophy of it itself is something that's needed, especially in a time where our society, both men and women, are being weakened systematically. And so if we're being weakened, then the antidote to that is to try to find a way to re-strengthen these elements in ourselves, and therefore that can spread into our communities, into our countries, and into the world. So that's the aim, and that's the whole philosophy behind it.
Cool. So there was a lot of interesting things there to respond to, and I do want to get to some of what you were just talking about the importance of physical training and sort of disciplined training for everyone, regardless of the level.
Right.
But I liked what you said about like the lie, like the martial arts battle is about confronting the lie, right? So then your opponent, especially if he's bigger than you or maybe more accomplished or more skilled, is symbolic for the lie you tell yourself that you're little, or you can't do it, or you can't make a difference, or you can't overcome that. And then within the battle, convincing yourself otherwise, and therefore becoming victorious, right? Both through your training.
Good, yeah.
Yeah. So I like that. One of the things that you and I share, and probably some of the appeal, so I was an athlete as a kid too. I was a gymnast, and the reason, I mean, like I wasn't like Olympic level, but I did compete in NC2A and whatnot. And I realized, I mean, I've always known that you were a martial arts instructor and that you had done it. But when I was doing a little research on you before this, I realized you're actually fairly accomplished. I found a lot of videos out there of you fighting and whatnot. So tell us, can you just tell me a little bit about, like, you know, your youth sort of in athletics, the kind of training you did, sort of the amount, like kind of the discipline? Because I'm kind of wanting to track here, like a little bit, you know, I wonder in the way that I pursue truth in the way that you do, how much our early athletic training, not just the philosophy of it, but just like the day-to-day routine of it and the discipline required, influences the way we deal with this information as well. So I'm kind of curious about that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I definitely think that, so even though I was saying you don't have to do the physical side of it, I mean, for me, it was everything. I needed an outlet. I think as human beings, especially in a world like this, we need outlets like this, and we need a goal that's going to help us get off our butts and apply ourselves. And you can learn so much from that. It's not always just about getting that black belt or getting that medal. It's about the process of creating discipline and activating levels of creativity and finding inner strength and these things that you wouldn't normally expose yourself to or experience in your day-to-day life, right? So you're putting yourself in an extraordinary circumstance of getting up earlier, changing up your diet, maybe not going to as many parties, focusing in on some very hard, you're putting your body through hell, actually. And it's kind of a mimicry of or not a mimicry, it's like a metaphor of the underworld struggle, you know, the hero's journey and all of that. So for me, my in terms of martial arts, like I started at 9. I got my black belt in Shotokan karate. So I kind of grew up doing that art, and then I went into boxing and ninjutsu. It was kind of like I moved around a little bit, and so anywhere I would go, I'd find the local martial arts shop in there, and I would just jump in. And I did some amateur competitions, and then I finally found Japanese jiu-jitsu and kickboxing, which at the place I was training, they kind of did everything in one spot, and I had access to all kinds of champions and like high level martial artists. And I learned so much, and I kind of grew up with that for 15 years or so doing that. And it was a very eclectic thing because it was like I was training in separate places to get all these different skills. You know, you go to boxing to get good hands, you go to Taekwondo and karate for the kicks, you go to some wrestling and some of this, but in this place I was training, it was kind of everything in one spot. So I loved that. And so I just dove in and trained full time, and I worked my way up to my 3rd degree black belt in Japanese jiu-jitsu, got some degrees in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and then golden gloves, black belt in kickboxing. But for me, all those ranks and accolades, honestly, it wasn't about that. I just kept showing up, and then they go, okay, here's your next rank, or here's your next exam. And for me, it was like, oh, sweet, they're going to really push me hard, and I just want to see if I can pass the test, right? So I kept doing all these tests, and and then eventually got into instructing and teaching, starting with the kids and then moving my way up. And then I used to manage a couple dojos there in Ottawa where I was living, and then went and moved to Toronto, opened my own dojo, ran a dojo there with my wife for 8 years. And then we moved out west and continued our dojo practice out here. And then it got shut down, and the gym got permanently shut down during the lockdown. So I started doing a few at-home training videos just for fun. I kind of have my pandemic training series that I created, and I put it up on my Patreon wall for people that wanted to support the show. And it was something I was doing for my students that were all like, "Oh, we miss training." And through this entire process, as I was going to the dojo to train or teach, I would always be reading or watching videos from other martial artists and trying to keep that balance of the physical and the philosophical side and the concepts. Like, instead of teaching it and training it as this sort of paint by numbers system, I started thinking about it a lot more conceptually and thinking, okay, if I can think of this as a general concept, I can go further with it. And then I started seeing so many mirrors between what I was learning and achieving in my martial art practice, as well as what I was achieving in my other research, which this research of comparative religion, mythology, history, politics, conspiracy, UFOs, whatever it is, was always something I've done as well. And so those were the two things. And I thought, well, if I'm going to make a show and I'm going to have a way to kind of put all of myself and all the skills I've gained together, it has to be both of those things. It has to be the philosophy side and the big picture side, as well as the personal development, personal training, physical fitness, health, optimal health, all these things. And when you combine those together, I think it's a very powerful force. And that's what's really been the backbone of my work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, like, for me, like most of the things that I've ever been really passionate about, which would be really gymnastics. And then I also, like, for many, many years engaged in the underground dance music scene. I like very underground styles of like house and techno music and listening to them all night long. And then I like this weird informational field that like pulls together things from, like just hardcore political research to like, psychic Bigfoot, UFO, whatever, I mean, like the kind of pulling in each of those things. Like, so to me, those things seem very different, gymnastics, the dance music and the thing, but for me, they're very similar because it's all about the angle from which you approach something and what you're using it to do. Right? Like there's a huge like psychological component, a huge emotional component, but also this sort of creativity and a way of like in gymnastics, I couldn't necessarily do like the more typical traditional skills all the time. So I had to come up with like my own unique way of doing stuff. And then with the dance music, for me, it came along at a time, like almost a disastrous time in my life. And it really helped me to sort of organized all the things that were going on in my mind. I danced for a long time and you kind of get into this rhythm. The rhythm from certain practices of martial arts. Like, I don't know if you've ever done any capoeira or anything like that, right?
Oh, that's fun. I'm not the best at capoeira, but it's so fun.
Yeah, so that, that for people who don't know, that's a martial art disguised as dancing. It's also a Brazilian thing. But there's a rhythm to it that allowed me to sort of like just organize the craziness of my life and my world for those hours while I was dancing. And then this information here, like it's super cool because you and I can look at the same, like we could watch the same 5 or 10 videos or read the same 5 or 10 books and come away with like the different pieces that each of us think are important. Like the way we put the narrative together is different. And then we can talk about it and get something even more interesting and out of it and whatnot. And so for me, all 3 of those allow that to kind of happen. And when I am able to incorporate all those things into my life, then I find that's when I do the best. So I try and also help people with that as well in the way that I teach stuff. I do nutrition consultations and some life coaching and whatever, but I try and pull all that in for the very reason that you kind of just explained. I want to ask you, just because I go a little bit with intuition on some of this stuff here. So you got into the athletics and the martial arts and stuff as a kid, and I sensed that you had some maybe personal struggles in your teenage or your early 20s kind of years that sort of rededicating or finding a new excitement for some of those old things that had helped you as a kid again helped you to sort of overcome. That's kind of the similar thing that happened with me, and I kind of have a suspicion that that may be with you. Am I right about that? And can you tell us a little bit about
You
that?
got a good intuition.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when you meet people, you really start to see that some of the best quality people you'll meet are people that have been through hell in their lives,
Yeah.
and it's that hell that they've experienced that it was what inspired them to really go and apply themselves to their craft. You either do that or you fall into the abyss, and that's where I was at. I had a lot of challenges growing up. I was moved around a lot as a kid because my mother was going through a significant amount of health problems and was in and out of the hospital. That
Mhm.
created a lot of anxiety for me. My father was working shift work. So there was a lot of, things that were going on that put me right off the bat at a young age into a place of, just being constantly anxious and afraid. And it grew into a more severe level of anxiety. And it got to a point where, especially because when I started hitting my early teens, all of that was boiling up and I had no real outlet for it. I mean, I've been training martial arts, but I didn't yet know how to train properly, like how to use it as a way. And I didn't even know that it was helping me. So I didn't think of it like that at that time. But I remember going through a period of time where I was very confused. I was depressed. I was kind of freaking out. And this was probably when I was like 14, 15. And my parents, they're just trying to do whatever they can. And so, then you go and you start seeing psychiatrists and because they don't, a lot of people aren't trained with just how to deal with an adolescent teenager that's just confused and just needs some guidance. And so they're just like, well, go to the doctor, let's go talk to the experts. That's what we all do. Right. But that started spiraling into them prescribing me all this medication. I'm like, why do I got to take medication? I'm just feeling a little bit weird about my life right now. I need to figure some stuff out. And of course, they don't think of it like that. They think in terms of, well, you have a problem and we have a drug that will fix it for you. And, and you get into that stuff. And so, yeah, I was probably 15 years old. They were putting me on stuff like Paxil, Ativan, stuff like that. And it was short-lived because immediately it just started numbing me out. And I didn't believe in it, but I just did it because I didn't have any other option. And it was actually my karate sensei that came to me, and there was some other stuff that happened that I won't really get into, but he came to me and he said, listen, you have all the potential in the world. I consider at that time, I think I was like a purple belt or brown belt or something. Is like, you're one of my top students. You're always here early. You're the one that leaves the latest. And now you haven't been training and they've got you here on these meds and these doctors don't know what they're talking about. He's like, I could fix you better than any of these doctors. You just got to come and train with me and I'll help you with anger management and I'll help you with all this stuff. And so he actually allowed me to come and live with him. And so I moved out. I went and kind of lived in his basement and I would get up every day and train. And he would help counsel on a few different things and give me lots of material. And that's what he would do. He's like, here, read this book on, how to get your mind right or how to deal with anger or how to punch a Maccaray board or whatever. And so we would do that stuff. And then, it's just kind of it was a period of time where I really had to find out who I was because I'm a mind, I'm a brain. I'm constantly up here, right? I'm an Aries. And if this isn't right, it can, keep me up at night. It can, there's just things get out of control, right? So the physicality of martial arts, the ability to focus, the ability to apply myself was just an amazing therapy, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And it helped me rebuild myself and find my identity and find my purpose. And once I connected to that, this would have been, maybe it probably took me till about 18, kind of 19. And I was still kind of coming out of it, where I really felt at peace. And I felt like I had grown past that former version of myself and really came into my next phase, that I got rid of all that anxiety, depression, fear. I was, committed 100% to my craft, was out finding different jobs and really trying to be productive and apply myself. And then I also started surrounding myself with the right people. That was a big thing as well, was getting the right friends around me, getting the right support system around me. And when all those forces came together, as well as the incredible information that I got from some of the books that I was reading. I got into Bruce Lee a lot at that time, the Tao Te Ching, Sun Tzu's Art of War, Joseph Campbell, just, studying really, it started to answer questions and give me purpose. And once I had that, I've never gone back to that. I have always just been on an upward trajectory of, being able to find my best self and be at peace with myself and be happy and find fulfillment in life. And so I think that's what really drove me, because I also had a lot of friends that they went the other way. They didn't come out of those scenes. They went into the drugs and into the gangs and into that stuff. And I guess I look back and I went, hey, if those buddies of mine had found what I found and had the support and information and knowledge that was given to me, they would have made something of themselves. They wouldn't be in jail. They wouldn't be dead. They wouldn't be alcoholics. They wouldn't be drug addicts. So I thought, well, then that's a noble goal, is to go out there and teach martial arts and also teach people the stuff that helped resurrect me and give me my life purpose. And that, I think, was one of the major motivating factors for me to do the work that I do. And then simultaneous to that, I started noticing, it's like in the Matrix when he's like, you start to notice there's something wrong with the world. Mm-hmm. Things aren't quite, and then you start going down those rabbit holes and you realize, wow, I don't have to blame myself for everything. Like there's stuff going on in this world that influence our society and our culture and the media. And, so many things we've been told are lies. And, you start studying religion and the roots of all these things, and you gain perspective. And even though you don't find all the answers, at least you're in a place where that you can go out and discover this for yourself. You don't need some authority to tell you. You don't need some guru. I mean, in the beginning, I did need those senseis and those teachers, and I still do, but I don't need them the way I used to need them, because I've given myself that foundation. So that's kind of a long form explanation of where I came from. And here I am today. I feel like I've been better for it. I'm actually grateful for those hard experiences growing up, because they made me into who I am.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You got through it sooner than me. I mean, for me, that trouble started really a little bit later and lasted a lot longer. But just like what you described about really dedicating yourself to sort of your training, and then like the physical aspect of it, but also the philosophical aspect, or educating yourself as almost like a parallel or part of it. For me, when I was finally able to pull myself out of the shithole that I had largely created for myself, it was a rededication to, like, I'm assuming you were probably a pretty hyper kid, right? I was as well. And so the physical training helped me to like expend some of that energy, so I didn't just turn it around up here, because also I'm in the head all the time, and and whatnot. And so getting back into doing a lot of physical fitness training and remembering, okay, like this was part of why I had success as a kid. It wasn't just about being a good gymnast. It was about like, I need to really take care of my body to be at my best emotionally and intellectually and all that kind of stuff. And then like what you're talking about, finding that really good balance between this much physical training, this much paying attention, what I put into my body, both in terms of food, but also into my mind in terms of information and the kind, and then the people you surround yourself with. And then things start to sort of come together. And I recognized that it was pretty similar to when like I had things in order as a kid, when things were right with like the training and school and reasonable stuff with the rest of my life, and somehow it got horribly out of balance. Like it had to get really deeply into the abyss before I was able to
sometimes that's what it takes
to come out of it. But I think one of the things, and kind of this is where I want to go next with the conversation, because I think that like we're in a time right now where on some level, almost everybody is in some level of crisis or abyss. Mm-hmm. Right. And because of some of the things going on in the world, right. Like everybody is being forced to live differently than they have lived before. A lot of people have had their livelihoods taken away, or their ability to connect with loved ones and whatnot. And some people, I feel like, are in a bigger crisis right now because they haven't addressed some of these personal internal issues. I think that like a lot of people who are really interested in and follow a lot of it, alternative information, or especially stuff that's very conspiratorial in nature. And I count myself amongst this. I was like this for a long time. We get into this place where there's so much wrong with the outer world that we can't be okay within ourselves until something gets fixed in the world. And it took me a long time to, I think instinctively I always knew that it was like an inside job. You had to fix yourself first before there was going to be any change sort of in the outer world. But it took a long time to convince me of that. And then when I kind of shifted to this, there was a time, and I've talked about this before, where I wasn't going to be able to be okay until everybody knew the truth about the government and all the sex trafficking had stopped, and they stopped the chemtrail program and all, whatever, all this kind of stuff. And I waited for that to happen for a long time, and and then at a certain point, I guess after it took a long time, but I finally got bored of waiting, maybe, and I was like, well, maybe the only thing I really have any control over is changing myself. So I'm going to work on that for a little while and see what happens. And it's come to my sort of awareness that if actually everybody sort of did that, right? If everybody took this time or any other period of time, and really the only thing we can change for sure is ourselves. We can work really hard at changing things in the outward world, and oftentimes it may happen, but sometimes it doesn't, right? But within ourselves, we always have the ability to make change. And if kind of everybody focused on that, then all of these outward things that needed changing, nobody would tolerate that shit anymore. Yeah. Right? Once a person has really gotten, in some ways, I'm trying to look for the exact right word here, but really adamant with themselves about holding themselves to a certain standard, right? Instead of worrying about all the other things out there, then the change can happen, because I don't think anybody who's done their personal work is going to do the kind of bullshit that the people that are the problems are doing, but B, we're certainly not going to tolerate it. Can you speak to that a little bit? The importance of really, maybe it's not that we shouldn't pay attention to the outer world, but sort of switching the percentage of focus.
Right. Yeah. And good for you for being at that point, because I had to go through it too. And I still do, because you know what, Emily, that comes from your humanity. That comes from a virtue, the desire to see injustice and evil and all of these things resolved, and these egregious crimes against humanity. And it's so many ways we could talk about the assault on freedom. We need people out there to put their voice to that issue. But here's how I came to it, because I was like you. I'm a warrior. I want to solve problems immediately. That's what I want to do. Okay. So when I see a problem and I definitely see a legitimate adversary, I want that thing. I want that gone. When you start learning about the whole human trafficking and what's going on with children, I mean, that's got to change you somewhere, and it can change you in one of two ways. It can change you into a pessimistic, cynical, bitter person, because you're just realize you're banging your head against the wall, hoping to wake up the entire world to this issue, or you can be productive with that. And by that, I mean, you do exactly what you just said, Emily, which is for some people, it may be a focus balance of, I'll do percentage of this, focus on that, and percentage of this. But for me, I started to get to the point where I found out it's about what's the foundation. Yeah. And you'll probably know this from doing the gymnastic work. It comes from your grip. It comes from your stance, in the physical body, right? If you don't have a good grip, you're not going to do the thing on the rings. If you don't have a good stance, someone's going to sweep you out and you're done. So if I look at that structure, I go, okay, well, I need a good foundation. That foundation has to be done internally and only by me. I mean, there's teachers, there's inputs, there's wisdom I can gain from others. But in the end, I'm alone on this. This is a solo journey. That scares the hell out of most of us. Mm-hmm. And it only does, the only reason I think it does is because of how we've been taught. We've been taught to be followers. We've been taught to be sheep, really, and not be empowered individuals. That's why, and I saw this in the martial art world first. I saw this. I saw these, 27-degree black belts with their big guts, and you're sitting there, and maybe they had a good past martial art experience, whatever, but they would come out and it would be all about, this paint by numbers sort of martial arts system. And it was all about ego and how everything looked. And it just didn't have any soul to it. And when I started reading people like Bruce Lee, he had a totally different idea. He was like, no, get rid of the cookie cutter stuff. Make this an art form. Make this be unique. The world's trying to turn you into something else. Everybody's trying to convert you into something. Everybody wants you in a uniform, saluting their thing. Be your own. Be your own individual. And then I go, oh, wow. And Bruce Lee nailed it. But then there's next levels to that. You start reading people like Nathaniel Brandon. You can even find some great, there's so many great people out there that we're trying to encourage us to go on this journey of what you could call selfhood or self-discovery, self-actualization, however you want to put it. And when you come from that as the base, where you first of all, you know that you have this thing called a self that is separate from everybody else. And I know in a lot of the mystical new age world, they hate that word separate. They hate anything divisionary. They look at everything as divisionary.
Yeah.
Any kind of wall that you're putting up, any kind of way that you're protecting, you're creating division. And that's not the way I look at it. I look at it as, no, you're protecting what you value.
Mm-hmm.
The only people that give everything away for free, the only people that just give all of themselves to everybody else are people that don't value themselves. Because you don't just give away everything that you value all the time. You protect what you value. Now there's a level to that as well. You can get into a point where you're not doing any kind of work to improve the world or whatever. But the balancing act is that you have the foundation of, I have a self. I realize that I have a unique characteristic because of my unique, it's a combination of things, from the biological to the psychological to the spiritual. I have a unique system of, or what's the word? I have a unique expression of genetics and biology. I have a unique expression of thinking because of how my life happened to me and the experiences that I've had, and also what I chose to do with my time. I mean, there's always that too, right? And then, so we're all unique. That means that all those forces combined, the challenges, the positive things, they are all there to build something in me so that I can now create from that basis. So whatever I'm creating, whatever I'm addressing, whatever challenges I'm going to face in the world, I have to start there first. If I do it backwards and only go external and look at everything as, well, it's the big bad government, big brother, globalist elite that are to blame for everything. They're the ones holding me down. They're the reason I can't be successful. They're the reason that I'm enslaved and all these kinds of things. And you go, yeah, there's some blame we could point. There's some fingers we could point. There's some names we could name, and we can do that. However, when you say that in that frame, you've given all your power to them. Whereas when you say it as, who are these people trying to enslave me right now and trying to lie to me? Like, I don't have to let them do that to me. I can create a psychological and spiritual immune system, just like we do with our body, to protect against that virus of lies and propaganda and people trying to recruit you into their cults, right? So the only way you can be immune to all of these forces trying to turn you into something that you otherwise wouldn't be is that you have that basic foundation of, who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose? And, that's my mission. If I don't know what that is my mission. I'm not going to do anything else until I nail that. So now that I feel like I've really gotten to that place, it is actually, I think as you were saying, like, my work has been on and off and sporadic, and I've tried different things. I've really come to a place now, going through all these challenges and thinking and personal development, that the work I produce now, I feel like, is stronger. I'm much more proud of it. And I'm trying to constantly refine it the way I used to constantly try to refine my roundhouse kicks or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's that process of working with that self-actualization, creativity, analytical, all those skills together, that it actually has built something that I think keeps me, so I don't lose my mind, it keeps the balance going, and it's also effective. Because that's another thing that people like you and I would always look at, coming from that physical training background, is people like us want to know what's effective. Like, there's all this theory about what the best way to do things is, but I want to know it for myself. It needs to be somewhat tangible. And so, so that's the process for me, is start with the self, work on that, do enough, we call it shadow work or inner work, whatever you want, the inner martial arts. And then from there, you're a stronger force to go out and create an impact. And you also then have to come to that knowing that there are things you can change and there are things you cannot change. And when you become comfortable with that, and you realize that, look, you're here serving the truth, you're here serving your mission in this life, and there are other forces at work, and there are other people involved in what's going on. You don't have the responsibility to save the entire world. You don't have to wrap up all the globalists, the global crime syndicates or whatever, and put them in jail. But what you can do is you can contribute to the effort of enlightening yourself, enlightening others, and operating in the space of free will, where you're not forcing people to do it. You're not trying to create this cult-like environment. You're trying to promote the concept of free thinking, free inquiry, freedom of thought, freedom of movement. And when that is your message, then I feel like it's going to have much more impact. Even though it might not always be as popular, it's going to have more impact, and you'll be able to look yourself in the mirror and sleep better at night.
Absolutely. So there's a couple interesting things you said. I want to address the polishing off the roundhouse kicks, and then I want to talk about freedom of movement a little bit, because I think that's something that we're all concerned about in the external. But I want to talk about freedom of movement in the sort of internal, in that more personal sense.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, I feel like you're absolutely right. Like when I kind of tune back into you in the last couple of weeks, it looks like you're like, so in gymnastics, it would be like train, and you learn new skills, and then you start doing them and you get better at them. And then in a few months before competition season, you start polishing your routines up, right? Where you already trust yourself to do the skills. There's not anxiety anymore or concern. So then it's just like, putting the finishing touches, making it look really amazing, all of that kind of stuff. And you've gotten to that place where you're polishing your routine up, and it's about, you're competing now, right, in a way that is well-rounded, and it actually really, really cool to watch. It's cool to see somebody develop, right, in their media presence in the same way that we used to develop in our sort of athletic space and whatnot. But as per the freedom of movement right now, so I think I love doing the internal external analysis comparison, or the reflective thing. And that's one of the things people are most concerned about right now, is that, are we going to have freedom of movement going forward? Are we going to be able to travel from place to place without immunity passports or vaccines? Are we going to have to wear masks and be social distanced and all of this kind of stuff? And I've noticed this before with obviously other topics, but it comes right close, like up close and center with this one in particular. A lot of the people who are worried about that freedom of movement are people who, if they came for you with the vaccine syringe in hand, they wouldn't be able to run very far to get away, right? Like, they're actually not moving around right now in their lives, right? They don't have their body in shape, right? And that's different for everybody. Like, you and I obviously have athletic aspirations, and I'll speak for myself, also vanity aspirations on a certain level. I don't know if that's the case for you. But, so I don't expect that everybody wants to spend 2 or 3 hours a day working out like I might, might be heavenly for me. But I feel like everybody can do more. And I feel like one of the things, obviously not everybody, and certainly at a certain age, can't start like doing gymnastic stuff. I don't even do that anymore, right? But martial arts is one of those things that I think, unless you're incredibly old, right, is actually something that a person could take up, that is good for physical exercise, good for discipline and psychological discipline and all that kind of stuff, but also for self-defense and being able to protect yourself as you try to move about freely out there in the world. Can you talk about, like, maybe the value of, even if you are in your 30s, 40s, or even older and haven't really done competitive sports before, maybe the value of taking a martial arts course, or even just like learning some things from watching videos right now because we're in our house, and how that can really have a many-fold effect on your freedom of movement within your own body, but also, preserving your freedom of movement in the external world.
Right. I like that. Yeah, because freedom at the end is the goal, right? So how can we be free? There was an old concept that one of my instructors used to talk about, and it was about the psychology of sport and the psychology of combat, okay? Because there's a certain psychology you need, and a competitive psychology, like when you do competition or whatever. And you have to bring yourself into a place that you have to trust yourself. You have to trust, as you said, you have to trust, especially when you're integrating a new skill set or moving up into a new tier of competition to challenge yourself. You need to integrate new skills. You can't do the same stuff you used to do. You have to add more to it. The only way you can do that is by enhancing your ability to move more efficiently and more freely, so that you're not expending so much energy, and therefore you can perform at a higher level longer. There are certain things you can do in martial arts this will work if it's just someone's trying to mug you and it's just a quick, like 10-second skirmish. You don't need a lot of cardio for that. It's just quick, done, get the hell out of there, right? Although you do need some cardio to run the hell away, especially if they have friends. But then there's things that are more technical. And in order to be able to pull that off, in order to be able to fight at that level, and you would have to fight a more powerful opponent, You need to up your physical fitness and your movement. And it's not just about how many push-ups you can do, it's how efficient are you at your output and your input. So are you breathing properly? Are you timing your explosive movements? Or are you just going explosive the whole time and then wondering why you're gassing out? So the monitoring of where you're at in your workouts and in your training and then in your performance physically is also, if you pay attention to that, you'll notice that that's the same process, more or less, of what's happening when you're shaping your mindset, right? So if you can't really move your body freely, I personally believe you can't really think freely. I think the mind and the body are connected. I think the ability to move your body freely and understand it and be efficient in your movement and activating what people like Wilhelm Reich called your somatic intelligence. When you can connect to that, there's an upgrade that happens in the mental power, the brain power that you actually have. And it also, there's new neural connections that are being made at all times. There's new neural pathways that you're carving out, and you're literally creating your mind. The mind I have, I gave to myself by creating it, by forging it, by training it, by working it, by making mistakes, by, learning about it. And that's something that's, I think people don't always think of. They think of, well, I got to go get to the gym because I got to keep my heart rate up and I don't want to have a heart attack when I'm 60, and it's just or I want to look good on the beach. That's fine. That's great. There are those benefits, but there's an even deeper benefit of having a much more free mind, a powerful mind that has the lights on. We're asking why people can't see what's happening. They can't see the lies coming from the media. They can't see these agendas that are playing out. They're obvious to everybody that, the reason is because their mind is fogged. Like if you were wearing some glasses and it was just fogged up all the time, or you had the mask on and because you're breathing through the mask, it's fogging up the lenses of your glasses. You can't see anything, right? So to take the fog away, work the body, work some breathing. And in martial arts, anybody can do it. And you can learn some basic self-defense for sure. But even just for what I'm talking about, you can do some Tai Chi stuff. Like I remember before she passed, I got my mom some DVDs on Tai Chi, and, I give this stuff out to people. Like, hey, just do some breathing and can you move your hands up and down like this? Like do the paintbrush with me with some breathing. Like start there. Get up in the morning and do 5 minutes of this with some breathing. Do some belly breathing exercises, to activate the hara, the energy force, and get your blood pumping. Get outside in nature, go for a walk. But you're doing it consciously. You're not just doing it arbitrarily. You're doing it consciously. When you do that, I feel like you're giving yourself a better framework and all the ingredients you need to power your mind so it can be thinking in the same way that your body is thinking and it's intelligent on a different level. You're activating that in your mind. And then you stop even seeing the divisions in the body of, well, I have my mind and my body and my spirit. Well, yeah, that's just for basic. The real masters know that that's all just one package, holistic package of what you are. It's just different expressions of different parts of the dimensions of who you are. So if we are having problems today, and we're struggling for our freedom in the world, and the governments are becoming tyrannical and they're locking things down and they're doing what government does, there should be no surprise if we have a population of people who are incredibly unhealthy. Yes, we can get into the fact that, yep, they totally, the GMOs and the sugars and the chemicals and all that stuff that they put everywhere and the drugging of everybody. Yep. But at the end of the day, is it really force? Really? Like they're selling, what it is they're selling you something. And this is how the dark side, quote unquote, works. This is how they know that if they're going to get you and hook you, it has to be a will. It has to be some will involved. So they sell you things. When you turn on CNN, they're selling you a worldview. They're selling you a polished bunch of information that you can then use to build your belief systems, right? They're selling you something. You decide to accept it and to buy it. Or you turn CNN off and you go read some books and you do some more exercise and you change your diet a little bit and you get alternative points of view. It's the same everywhere. So it really does come down to self-responsibility. And with the whole thing about people worried about, well, are they going to lock down the airplanes? Are they going to make me wear masks? Are they going to mandatory vaccine? We don't have to do anything we don't want to do. Yeah. What are they going to do to billions of people that just go, yeah, we're not afraid of this. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. We're not doing biometric face scanning software everywhere. We're not putting up 157 5G towers in a small town. We're not putting up 60,000 satellites into the upper atmosphere. We're not doing that. We're just not going to allow it. We're not going to support it. We're not going along with the program. We are not going to acquiesce to this. And the only types of people that can think like that are people who are empowered from within and have the courage to make that stand and say, I don't care if you're going to bring me to the town square and draw me by wild horses in all different directions, the way they used to do in the Middle Ages. I don't care. I will not comply. I will not betray myself and allow this to go forward. And I will do what I can to help inspire others to hopefully they can see what's really going on. That's all you can do. But it does start with you. And I think it's easy for us to go, oh, look at the big bad guys up on the hill that are trying to turn this world into a big gulag, which is what they are trying to do, by the way. You go, okay, well, they're only really a couple thousand people at the end of the day, you know? Even if you put it at like, okay, let's say it's 10,000 people that run the world or less, you know what I mean? How many people are they trying to control? And if they really wanted to wipe us out, don't you think they could have done it already? They must have a need for us. There must be a purpose for us. So if we keep giving them our power, i.e. being afraid of all the spooky things they keep saying, oh, there's this to worry about. The world's going to end in 12 years because of climate change, because of your SUVs. This is all these things are out there, these big panic button things, the pandemic, everything. We're believing it. All the people walking around in masks and reporting their neighbors and contact tracing all their friends, they're believing a lie based on fear. If they were empowered from within and free inside here, they wouldn't fall for that and they would not do that. So this is where I think it all comes into what you were talking about, how important it is for each of us to do that inner work first and then assist others, then go out and try to empower people with knowledge. But we also have to be careful not to do it in the way that has been done to us, which is this authoritarian way of, you have to believe me and I'm the one that's going to say. It has to be done through free will. We cannot force anybody to do anything, or otherwise we're just going to turn into what we hate.
Yeah, free will and setting example, right? Instead of saying you must do this, it's kind of like, well, I'm going to do this, and this is gonna, you know, and when you see this works for me, I'm happy to tell you how I did it and share it with you, so then you can go create your own way to do it and tell the next person and whatnot, and creating a society of, you know, each person has developed themselves and actualized themselves in, you know, different ways, but with a few core similarities that are really important to that process, right? Couple of things that as we talk, speaking of turning the TV off and reading books as we wrap up the first hour, have you ever read the book Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman?
I've read portions of it. Everybody, I should read the whole thing, but to be honest, I still have to finish the book.
There's a second book. What's the name of the second one that we read? There's a second book that was much less popular. That I think it was actually a better book in some ways, because it really goes further into some of this deeper philosophical and more like shamanic aspect of some of this awakening to the way the world really works, or whatever, right? The Dark Knight. I mean, it's there in the first book, but it's still framed really around athletic competition. And then in the second book, it's really more about learning to live at peace in the world, right? Like not just getting back to his ability to be able to compete in gymnastics or whatever. I can't remember what the name of the second book is, but I was thinking about this while you were talking. And then there's another book I was curious if you read. It's called Right Use of Will, because you were speaking about will a few minutes ago.
No, I haven't heard of that book. I've definitely read a lot on that subject, though. There's some good works out there for that.
There's a really good book. It's a very short book. It's called The Right Use of Will. And it really talks about the necessity of rebalancing spirit and will, that like something has happened to humanity where it went like too far towards spirit, and the will has been completely abandoned. And this gets into some aspects of like the Lemurian and the Atlantean kind of civilization, but this idea, kind of what you were talking about, of that I have self, right? And that like you know, everything that happens to us is something that we sort of, they can't do it if our will isn't sort of in line with that kind of thing. The book is really good. And just some of the things you were saying, I think, okay, the name of that other, the second book is The Sacred Journey of the Peaceful Warrior. And it's much less popular and well known. The first one had like a movie made and stuff like that. But I just been curious. But this right use of will thing, I think that's maybe what we're talking about here, right? Like in terms of when people get, like, spirituality is important and great, but some of this stuff in terms of like just thinking positively and things will go well, that people and sometimes in the alternative
Right.
communities get into, or just we are all one, right? And all that kind of stuff. It leaves us a little bit soft, and this the will, right? And some of this stuff that we're talking about here in developing yourself really sharpens that part back into balance and stuff. So I don't know, if you get a chance to check out that book, I feel like there's some things in there that you really might appreciate. I've talked about it a couple
Oh,
of
I'll
times.
definitely check it out. I'll take some notes. It's always good. I always love that stuff. Yeah, it's important. I mean, your will, that's what you're trying to use and understand. And this is now the debate of the day, isn't it? We're back to the whole, does free will even exist? Is it free will or is it deterministic universe? Are you a volitional being or are you a non-volitional being? So I found it interesting. Just a couple points was that when I was covering all the stuff about the pandemic and what was happening around, I started noticing a lot of the discussions I was having in my feed started turning back to these philosophical chats about free will
Mm-hmm.
and how valuable that is. And when you have one side saying we just want our freedom back, and the other side saying, well, you can't have it back because we have a pandemic scenario right now, so you got to give it up. You're kind of like, well, isn't that really where the battle lines have always been? The
Yeah.
people that are afraid of freedom and don't want it and prefer servitude because it's safer, the illusion of security and safety, versus those people that have that inner strength and they want to be free, sovereign beings. There's always been that divide. So here we are again, having those discussions around this issue. And I could point you to the same debate happening in all the other issues as well. When you really boil them all down, it's not really about the thing. It's about what's going on in the psychology and inside each and every one of us.
Yeah, it's I mean there's a couple different ways to frame that, but absolutely it's basically, you know, there's, you can look at it as the people who want to be left alone and the people who won't leave you alone, right? Kind of thing. You know,
Exactly.
and I've found it interesting how like the same people that I've been pestering and bothering to get their health in order, get their eating in order, exercise for 15, 20 years, like suddenly like they started to be concerned about health on March 11th, 2020, and they want to hold those of us who have been tending to our health for many years now hostage because they failed to kind of take care of
Isn't it funny? It's so amazing. And I'm glad you said that because I've noticed the same thing. And hey, no offense to those people, but we kind of know who's wearing the mask, who the Karens are, both man and woman, by the way, and who are the people that are actually like, you know, just they understand what's going on and they actually are proactive about your health. If I'm proactive about my health and I'm a healthy, strong person, then I'm actually a pillar of health and herd immunity in my community by
Yep.
doing that, because it's something I'm doing. I'm not reacting and going, oh, I wasn't doing all of that, but don't worry, Bill Gates is going to come in and save the day with a vaccine that they've never tested and is loaded with quantum dots. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to be like, well, I personally just want to go back to the way I was doing it to fight off all the other billions of
Yeah.
viruses that I'm exposed to on a daily basis in this world and the future ones that are going to come down the pike. So I'm not afraid of that. I trust nature. I trust my immune system. I trust the process that I've dedicated my life to
Yeah.
achieving optimal health, the vitamins, the nutrition, the food, the mental. What about the mental state? How does that affect your health? Nobody talks about that. You know,
Yeah.
I got 17 books sitting beside my desk, written by Wilhelm Reich, who wrote an entire thesis on how to achieve health to combat all disease for all time,
Yeah.
just based on who you are. So why don't we pull out those, or why isn't CNN reporting all of that and going, hey, we should resurrect some of that old ancient knowledge about how we could actually achieve immunity from all these diseases for all time? That would be great. But they don't want to talk about that because it's not profitable, right? So
Yeah.
everybody's going to have to find out where they lie. I know where I lie. And, you know, at the end of the day, if it comes down to a head to head, the warrior class is not the one to mess with. Let me tell you that.
Absolutely. No, it just takes us right back to, is the solution internal or external? And the people who try to control things, to them, there's always an external answer, something that you have to do, right? So that to make whatever situation they need be okay, right? And then there's the internal answer, which is I'm going to trust my training, my health regimen, right? My ability
Right.
to overcome and whatnot. And I think that therein lies the, you know, that's where the battle really is, right? The people who are going to change themselves are the ones who think that they need to change everything else in order to, you know, to be okay.
Right.
They need me to wear a mask. They need me to have a vaccine. You know, it's very interesting.
Isn't it always funny? It's my mask won't work unless you're wearing it. My vaccine doesn't work unless you have one. My thing doesn't work unless you do it. And when you start seeing that amongst all these issues, you start to realize there's a bigger picture that's going on, that they're trying to create a collectivized
Collectivism.
like society. And so I don't want to have any part of that. And so that's why I will forever fight for freedom, sovereignty, and independence.
All right. That's a great place to wrap up the first hour. David, tell people where they can find you.
Everything's over at dwtruthwarrior.com and my other site, unslaved.com, where I do a premium show with my colleague Michael Tessarian from Ireland. And so those are the two sites that you can find all my work.
All right, awesome. And you guys can join us at patreon.com/offplanetmedia for the second hour. We're going to go Strange Mosaic and take a look at the external world now and see what's really going on. We'll see you guys in just a minute. Thank you, David.